Welcome to Riviera Rats, a Palme d'Or podcast. I'm Greg.
And I am Bill.
And today we are talking about the festival of 2017, where our winner was none other than The Square. But first, Bill, won't you tell me how you've been?
I've been good. You and I saw Maria the other day, which I really enjoyed. I'm still thinking about it a few days later.
Same.
It's already on Netflix, so my mom will probably enjoy it very soon and have a lot to say about it. I think she'll like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a nice time. We're recording this in the Oscars. We're deep into Oscar season. I'm probably going to go see something tonight. I'm going to see movies on as many of my free nights as possible while I'm on break from work. Once again, my mother's throwing a party while we're recording this, which is why you can all hear too much noise in the background. Sorry about that. There's really nothing I can do about it because when I record in a closed room, I have to use a different equipment, and the sound recording is never as good quality. So I'm stuck with using my desktop, which is out in the middle of nowhere, and I have this open concept house where you can't
hear yourself think.
So that is the challenge of living in a really, really big house with only one other person in the suburbs. I get it. The world has bigger problems, but it is the bane of my existence. That I just have a mother who always knows how to ruin everything, which brings us back to Maria, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it as well. And the point you made that we are recording this in December, but this episode will come out when the Oscar nominations are out, most likely, or just around that time. We can expect to see a good handful of Cannes films from the 2024 competition in the buzzometers, but also in the nominations.
Yeah, that seems to be more of a common thing now in the last since the pandemic, basically, and since the streaming services really may have introduced more people than before to international cinema.
Whereas in 2017, we've got a different story with this Cannes selection.
Yeah, this was a rough year. This was about as rough a year as 1975 was for me. Although there wasn't as many movies that were bad, but there's a lot of just okay stuff in this competition.
I would describe this, the overall package of 19 movies as middling.
Yeah, and then a middling selection for the Palme. But Let's get into it.
Let's get into it, Bill. Tell us about the festival.
This is the 70th Cannes Film Festival. It ran from May 17th to the 28th of 2017. Monica Bellucci was the host of the opening and closing ceremonies, who I have frequently told you is at the top of my don't need beer list.
Yeah, she can walk all over me in high heels.
Without a doubt. And I will beg for more. I particularly love the way she speaks. That sort of bored courtesan delivery that she always has, I think is divine.
Can I ask you, how did you feel about her getting the girlfriend casting in Beetlejuice?
She was the highlight of the movie for me. I looked forward to every time she was on screen. She made about as much sense as the rest of the movie did. I enjoyed that movie far more than I thought I would. Not because I think it's good. And I understand that she really is like an extra paintbrush in it, that when you finally get to the end, she finally makes sense as to why she's in it. But, I didn't care. And it's also, that's the point at which you also realize, because her character looks like Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, she has the exact same zipper when she breaks into pieces in the same shape. And you realize, oh, he really only has one movie to make his whole career. But people could say that about Fellini. I don't know. So,
Yeah. No, it was entertaining, and she made no sense, but I was also enjoying just watching her. Listeners, at this moment, I'm watching Bill descend the stairs. He's not going to ask Mr. DeMille for his close-up. I think he's going to wring the necks of 3 senior citizens. We may have to record this on a separate date after I bail him out of jail. Oh, here he returns. Oh, and there's no blood on his hands.
I'm going to get lectured about my attitude again. Anyway. And then speaking of delightful Italians, Claudia Cardinale is featured on the poster at the 2017 festival. It's a delightful image. I think you've seen it. She's like mid-dance. And when asked about it, she said, I am honored and proud to be flying the flag for the 70th Festival de Cannes and delighted with this choice of photo. It's the image I myself have of the festival, of an event that illuminates everything around. Happy anniversary.
And how did you feel about seeing your mother's look-alike on that poster?
Delighted. I'm always happy to see Claudia Cardinale.
Yeah,
I adore her. And as I said before, famously thought of as like pure Italian, even though she did not really learn Italian until she was an adult.
I love her in Once Upon a Time in the West
Yes, me too. I love that movie. That's like
so
one of the best
much.
westerns ever. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jason Robards is so sexy in it, but I digress.
Oh, you certainly do. I don't know that I don't know that Jason Robards was ever sexy in anything, but I don't know. Okay. I think his son is sexy. This is the first time in a long time that there are no major Hollywood studio films in the competition. And then, of course, what becomes the headline grabber for everyone who writes about this festival is the fact that we have Netflix appearing in competition for the very first time. We have Amazon Prime appearing for the second time, two films from each of them. And to great controversy, Netflix is booed when the logo comes up on a screening of Okja, which then had problems with the projection, so they restarted it. And then it got booed even more the second time. And part of the problem is the fact that there is this sort of, I don't know if it's an unwritten rule or an official rule, but that a film, if it's going to play in competition, there has to be a deal for it to be screened in a movie theater in France that year at some point. Netflix, of course, has its own way of doing that. They did try to make peace with this situation by arranging for theatrical distribution in France for their two films, but were hampered by the fact that in France, I don't know if it's changed since then, but at the time there was a law that a film cannot appear streaming until at least 36 months after it plays in a movie theater, which by the way is 3 years, which even in the days of like VHS distribution is a is a long waiting period to
Yeah, I wonder
avoid.
who wrote that.
Yeah, as somebody who doesn't go to the movies, like, anyway.
Piece about the Netflix controversy, though, it's so interesting to imagine only 7 years later we are in a different era culturally. Like this is a taken for granted, and
Yeah.
maybe the pandemic has changed our perspective on these things. Like we've just accepted now that the streamers are part of the landscape, and back then there was still an overt resistance.
Yeah, because following this year's controversy, the festival then did announce that no film could for sure play in competition unless they promised, like there was a distinct commitment to theatrical distribution. Prime was also booed at their screenings, even though they do take a more traditional approach to theatrical distribution for the films that they bother with, including in this case, which is that these both of these films, which were Wonderstruck and You Were Never Really There, did have theatrical distribution in France, while as Netflix's was Okja and the Meyerowitz stories. And they, of course, if they have the theatrical distribution, it's solely for the purposes of qualifying for Oscars, and it's on Netflix like a week later. Pedro Almodovar, president of the jury, was asked about this because everyone was asked about this, and he said, I don't see the Palme d'Or or any other prize being given to a film and then not being able to see this film on a large screen. As long as I'm alive, I'll be fighting for one thing that I'm afraid the new generation is not aware of: the large screen's capacity for hypnosis. For the first viewing of a film for every spectator, the size of the screen should not be smaller than the chair on which you are sitting, and it should not be part of your everyday setting. You must feel small and humble in front of an image that is there to capture you. This, for me, gives me a lot of insight as to why the Palme d'Or was chosen. It
Hmm.
does fulfill this dictate
It does.
quite well, for all that I don't like about that film. When Will Smith was asked about this, because he was, of course, on the jury this year, he said, my kids go to the movies twice a week and they watch Netflix, and there's very little cross between going to the cinema and watching what they watch on Netflix. This, of course, speaks to the development in the industry that has gotten even stronger since the pandemic, of the fact that studios are making only Marvel movies for big screens, and then everything that used to be like a mid-tier Fox 2000 or Sony Pictures Classics distribution movie goes straight to streamers.
Yes, with new exceptions with like Mubi and A24
Yeah,
and Neon. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's still changing because I think people are also going back to the movies, maybe not in the same way. I mean, movie studios always think of it as being in decline because they're always comparing everything to the numbers in like 1944. uh, but I do feel, I don't know. I live in a movie going city though, so my experience is anecdotal, and I'm rarely in an empty movie theater. It's not the case everywhere else.
We're basically in the turn of the 1970s again, where people are going to see movies that don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Tilda Swinton, of course, the star of Okja, was asked about this, particularly in the case of Okja, and whether or not the controversy was making it basically impossible for Okja to win the Palme d'Or, even though it was favored by many to be selected. And she said, in her usual, diplomatic way, as always, the truth is, we didn't actually come here for prizes. We came here to show this film, and it is true that we get the wonderful privilege to show this film on this screen. I think it's an enormous and really interesting conversation that is just beginning, but what I really think is that there is room for everyone. Tilda is great at not being the problem.
Yeah, no, really, she is.
Yeah, she learned the hard way through from that accidental email to Margaret Cho, and ever since then, it's been smooth sailing. So yeah, so Cannes ultimately decided to keep all of these streamers in the competition, but only one of them won prizes, and that could possibly be because of the controversy, but who knows? Emily Yoshida in Vulture writes that Lynn Ramsey and Sofia Coppola were hailed as triumphs for winning awards in the lineup. You know, a female director winning Best Director for the first time since the 60s, and a female director winning the Screenplay Prize, tied. But she says they felt arbitrarily assigned, and basically that Sofia Coppola should have just gotten the palm for Beguiled, even though it's not that great, but nothing else was that great. And so why not just give it to another woman, since Jane Campion, as she says, is lonely. Not at the time, of course. There are two women since then.
Yeah, it's a bit cynical though. Like none
Yeah,
of the
well,
movies. None,
her whole article in Vulture is very cynical, but I can also understand if you said, think about what we went through sitting through this lineup, and then imagine it doing it where you have to have a different outfit every day and run through
yeah,
the heat in the Riviera in May, and stand in lineups and deal with press crush and all that stuff, and then these are the films that you watch.
fair enough. Yeah, and it is like Anthony Burgess's quote about picking the Chronicle of the Years of Fire. Like, look, none of the movies are exceptional, so just give it to the one that is trying to say something.
Yeah,
If none of these movies are good, just give it to the one. Let's just give it to a female winner. I don't agree with it, but I understand the perspective.
yeah. Greg, tell us about the other competitions.
Sure thing. In Un Certain Regard, our opening film for the festival was Barbara. How would you say Barbara in French?
I think it's Barbara, no?
Barbara, no? By Mathieu.
I Wow, that was amazing. You just
I,
did a say goodnight, Greg, and you said say goodnight, Greg.
I
Anyway, go
know,
on.
I know. It's by Mathieu Amalric, and if you've listened to our 2010 episode, you'll know that we're still looking for a copy of On Tour, for which he won Best Director. So
Uh
please let
huh.
us know if you find it. The winner of the Un Certain Regard competition was A Man of Integrity by Mohammad Rasulov, who is in the news right now for having just won the Best Director prize from Los Angeles for The Seed of the Sacred Fig. From Valeska Griesbach, we have Western, a movie I still have yet to watch.
Same.
It keeps returning to my list on Criterion every time it returns to the collection, and I don't watch it.
Yeah.
And then we've got a Canadian picture or Canadian co-production by Taylor Sheridan called Wind River, starring Hammerhead himself.
It's excellent. I like that movie a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen.
I believe, and John Bernthal as well. And I believe it is the last film to have an on screen credit for Harvey Weinstein, which I also believe was removed in theatrical distribution. But I don't
Huh.
remember. I saw it in the theater, but I don't remember.
Out of competition, we've got Based on a True Story by Roman Polanski. I've
Hmm.
not seen this one. Have you?
I haven't either. I think the last one of his that I saw was his adaptation of Venus in Fur. But I
Hmm.
haven't seen this, and I haven't seen the one that he won at Venice for either, The Gentleman and the Spy. I can't find it legitimately or not.
We've also got out of competition Blade of the Immortal by Takashi Miike,
Hmm.
whose filmography I've seen very little of. I think I've only seen Audition.
Didn't we see First Love? Isn't that him?
You may have seen that. I did not.
No, I saw that with you, but I can't remember if that's his.
Hmm. How to Talk to Girl at Parties by John Cameron Mitchell, a controversial movie upon its release because it was a bit of a butcher job on its way to the festival.
Yeah.
Ismail's Ghosts by Arnaud Desplechin, who we've talked about in this pod before, and we will again when he wins. No, he never wins any awards, does he?
A Christmas Tale won an award. I think it was the year that Catherine Deneuve won the honorary palm,
Ah,
like the career palm.
we've got A Prayer Before Dawn by Jean-Stéphane Sauveur, who would later make Asphalt City, which was in competition in
Oh, okay.
2023.
It's a Thai prison movie. It's not bad. I saw it. It was all right.
The Villainess by Jung Byung-gil, which is a loose adaptation of Nikita.
Yeah, it's like a Korean Nikita. It's fun.
And then the most famous movie to release out of competition by the year end was Faces Places by Agnes Varda.
Mm-hmm.
A
And
movie,
JR.
yes,
Yeah.
a movie I adored.
Me too. I think it's her last, right? I
It
think
is her
she
last.
didn't. Yeah.
I went to see it by myself at a small theater in Mount Pleasant neighborhood and just wept for the beauty of humanity. I was such a
Yeah.
cornball during that movie.
And earned her first Oscar nomination, either the same year or the year after she had been given an honorary award. And she was like 90 when she went to the Oscars for that.
Right.
And had she won, I think she would have been the oldest winner ever. I
That's
think.
correct.
And then
She,
and by months because James Ivory won for Call Me by Your Name, and he was about 90 as well.
yeah, I think she's close in age to Emmanuelle Riva for the record for the oldest
Yeah.
women nominee.
Yeah.
In our special screenings, we've got Isabelle Watch.
Isabelle Watch. Isabelle Watch. Isabelle Watch.
Isabelle Huppert is back at the festival with Claire's Camera by Hong Sang-soo.
Yeah, which I still haven't seen.
No, neither have I. In fact, this festival is my official intro to Hong Sang-soo.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. From Andrey Téchiné, we've got Golden Years. Have you seen this one?
I haven't.
We've also got an inconvenient sequel. Maybe maybe inconvenient because no one asked for it.
Well, no one saw it. I don't know anyone who's watched it.
It's a sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, and it's about how we didn't deliver on our promises to save the world.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert: we still haven't. About North Korea, we've got the documentary Napalm by Claude Lanzmann, who's most famous for Shoah.
Joel. Yep.
From Vanessa Redgrave, we've got a documentary about the European migrant crisis called Sea Sorrow. And about the conflict between Buddhists and Muslims in Myanmar, we've got The Venerable W by Barbet Schroeder,
Mm-hmm.
who we would know for The Reversal of Fortune, that documentary about Coco.
Yep. And
In direct-
the great documentary about General Idi Amin as well.
Right.
Yeah.
In Director's Fortnight, we've got Sean Baker's The Florida Project, which but most people loved. It won many awards.
I definitely did. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely did. I'm still lukewarm on it. I'm willing to go back and revisit because I do love him, and I do think he cares deeply for his characters, despite what people say. I Am Not a Witch by, I'll fuck this one up, Rungano Nyoni,
Mm-hmm.
which is a Zambian co-production. Let the Sun Shine In by Claire Denis, starring Juliette Binoche, a movie I've still not seen.
Oh, it's good. It's not my favorite of hers, but it's good.
And Patty Cakes, and that's cakes with a $sign in it, which is a rags to riches story about an amateur rapper.
Have you seen it?
No, have you?
It's got that Australian girl who was in the Dumplin movie, and I think Kathy Moriarty is in it as well.
And it's also got that comedian I like from Somebody Somewhere.
Oh, Bridget Everett.
Yeah.
She was just on TCM's podcast.
Bill, won't you tell us about the jury?
Absolutely, Greg. Well, of course, our jury president is Pedro Almodovar, who is my favorite living filmmaker, along with
Really?
Mikhail Haneke. Yeah, and, a genius whose career has been a thrill to us little gay boys. And I don't know if it's the case with other people of my generation. I learned about him because of Madonna, and I just love his films. And of course, it's an absolute given that he would be the president of the jury at some point. I have to say, I love him more when I'm watching his work. I find him I feel like he takes a bit of the pleasure out of his work when he deconstructs it. Because I
Mhm.
think he's just somebody who's in his head a lot, is what it is. I don't think he's a lot of fun to be around. And then, of course, his presence at the festival this year does showcase a lot of the things that are a bit like tired old man about him. The fact that all the movies in the festival are all about the evils of smartphones, and those are the movies that also get a lot of attention at the festival this year. There's whether it's the plot or the just elements of the film, there's a lot of like anti-cell phone shit in the square, done with humor, of course. But
Yes.
Loveless is all about how, look at her, she's scrolling through her phone instead of taking care of her kids. And Happy End also has a lot of cell phone stuff, and then he doesn't help by like I do feel that because he is all about like watching movies in a movie theater, which I agree with, but it's also like, do you not realize that the world doesn't care how you feel about the integrity of cinema going? But he
Hmm.
doesn't, because he's like 78 years old and he doesn't care. He also, at one point, he made a statement that, when quoted, reads as him saying, I thought BPM should have gotten the palm and I don't know why it didn't. And it's like, but you're the president of the jury, so wasn't that your job to do that? But also, why are you telling tales out of school? Like, once the jury is done and made its decisions, you shouldn't be ragging on your fellow jurors about what you think they should have picked. I feel like it's kind of, if this quote is quoted correctly. So again, I feel like there is something a little bit bratty about him, but it's
The
also what contributes to his incredible skill for combining like soap opera melodrama with genuine pathos.
Yeah, methinks the faggot doth protest too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Also on the jury, we have the brilliant Maren Ade, a German filmmaker who is responsible for Tony Erdmann, which should have won the Palme d'Or that year,
Most definitely.
and should win the Palme d'Or like every year. I think that movie's so freaking brilliant. She's only made like 4 movies, but they're all worth seeing. We have Fan Bingbing, the famous Chinese actress who went missing for a few months, and no one really knows why. Because they have a way of making you pay your taxes in that country that is unlike anywhere else.
Phil!
She will, during the height of her fame, she would often pop up in a supporting role in like a Hollywood action movie because, of course, again, Hollywood action movies are all about appealing to the Chinese audience, so they
Mhm.
will often throw in an actor from that country to really sweeten the pot. She's also great, and she's really pretty. We have Park Chan-wook, the South Korean film director, most recently of Decision to Leave, which I loved. Not
Mhm.
everyone was big on, but he also did Old Boy and Thirst. We have Jessica Chastain, the American actress and recent Oscar winner for The Eyes of Tammy Faye, who I think is really talented and somewhat insufferable and probably really nice. She smiled at me once and I got a good vibe off of her, and we know my vibes are right.
Yep.
But does have a tendency to. Sometimes I get the impression her mouth works a lot faster than her brain, and it's gotten to her into a little bit of trouble every once in a while, or at least I don't know. Makes me
She
think she's
seems
not brilliant.
she seems like someone whose joy in the work is doing the variety actors on actors.
Yes, although I think she gets a lot of joy from the actual work too. She's also a case of somebody who became famous at like 37, which for a woman in that business is really impressive, and has given some good performances. I mean, you and I talked about the fact that when we saw her as Tammy Faye, it was the first time we ever like wanted to hug her.
Yes.
She's so tender and endearing in that role. She made a lot of statements about how upset she was at the presentation of female characters in the film she saw at the festival this year. That I'm not going to say that I disagree with, and I'm not going to tell people how to feel about the way women are presented in media, especially in feature films. But every once in a while, you meet somebody who thinks that because a female character is flawed, that means it's a negative portrayal, and that just doesn't make you sound smart to me.
Well, it also makes it seem like this event, this culmination of movies selected out of thousands, came to this moment in such a calculated way to represent women en masse as like narrow tropes, and there's actually more factors than that at play.
Sure.
It's like whenever people talk about an Oscars year lacking diversity, they think that the problem begins and ends with the Oscars. It's like
Right.
no, it's the industry.
Right. Absolutely. Speaking of not very intelligent, we have Manchurian candidate Will Smith, American film actor and recent Oscar winner and slugger galore, who followed an impulse and ended up.
Bill, don't say her name. Don't you say her fucking name.
And I don't have to say her name. I just see her bright red Terminator eyes staring at him, uh, activating him. Sergeant Shaw. Sergeant Raymond Shaw.
Hit him. Hit him.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't lie awake at night thinking bad thoughts about Will Smith. I never thought he was such a great actor, but I understand why he's a movie star. There's a charisma there. There's a charm.
Oh, yeah.
And I also don't have a lot of pompous things to say about his most famous Oscar moment because he ruined his own night. You know, he didn't ruin mine. He won an Academy Award as a great crowning achievement of his career, and no one was talking about it. And it's his own damn fault. So
the funniest take I heard about that whole incident was when Michael Che was on WTF, and he said, "Can you imagine if Hannah Gatsby got slapped across the face?" Like, the reaction would have been instant.
Yeah. On the other hand, I don't need, like, you know, when they still talk about him being banned from the Academy or from the Oscars or whatever, like, I don't really need that. I'm not big on this whole, like, firing people for not doing the right thing, but, you know, a conversation does need to be had, I suppose. Anyway, who cares? This is many years before this that we're in this particular moment. We have Paolo Sorrentino, Italian filmmaker, most recently of The Hand of God, most famously of the Oscar-winning The Great Beauty, as well as Youth, which is the film of his I think I like the most. He is a great image maker. His movies aren't always all that deep, but I do enjoy them. We have a great French filmmaker, Agnès Jaoui, actress and filmmaker, whose 2000 film Le Goût des Autres, The Taste of Others, was nominated for an Oscar. And unfortunately, no one talks about it. It was a 5-star film for me. I absolutely loved that film.
One movie from that roster I had not seen.
Yeah, it's great, and I don't even know where you could find it now, but I saw it in the theater back then, and I was thrilled by it. She wrote it with her then partner, who I believe has passed away, Jean-Pierre Bacri. They also did a movie called Look at Me, or what was it called in French? Anyway, great filmmaker. And then lastly, we have Gabriel Yared, the French-Lebanese composer, most famous for his Puccini-esque score that he composed for The English Patient and won the Academy Award for Best Original Score of a Drama back when they did that sort of thing. That is our jury.
Bill, where are you on The English Patient? I forget.
Shut up, Greg. What's in competition? Just tell us and get it over with.
Winning the Grand Prix is Ruben Campillo for BPM, beats per minute. And do we pronounce the L's in his last name?
I believe it's Campillo. I mean,
Campillo?
That's not a French name, but he is French, so I think they say Campillo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 120 battements par minute, I believe, is the French title of the film.
Numbers escape me whenever I'm trying to do translations, so you have to literally spell it out. This helps to answer my question, like, how did Pedro permit this, hearing that he, in fact, himself was shocked that this movie did not win. However, I do wonder, like, looking back on other juries where the president has so much sweeping power, I do wonder how he did not exercise the same.
Well, as far as I know, the president has the jury to just reject the choice and make everybody go back to the drawing board and vote again and discuss again. And It could be that it was late enough in the day and the chef had already started making lunch and it smelled throughout the villa and Pedro was just not going to fight it. Or it could just be that he felt alone in loving it so much and that everybody else was on the same page. And he just, you pick your battles in these situations. I don't know. I just don't even know that we needed to even know he felt that way.
Yes.
It was a surprising choice also because that movie played to great acclaim because it's a great movie. It's so beautiful and heartbreaking and powerful and funny and sexy and all this stuff. And it was talked about as being the obvious choice for the Palm all throughout the week. So, of course, it was surprising to people when it ended up going to Ruben Östlund, who has since won a second one that he deserved so much more that it makes it even that much more of a sort of a wasted opportunity that this film did not win.
I agree with that assessment. I finally watched this movie for this pod. I guess I kept putting it off because
you're always such a bitch about gay movies, yeah.
Yeah, no, I genuinely. Well, so are you, BGM. I'd heard all the good reviews. I love Time Out. I love Eastern Boys, but I still felt reticent because it's just well trod well trodden
Yeah,
territory.
it's another AIDS movie. It's another activist movie, and yet, and I felt that way when I sat down to watch it. And I saw it on the big screen the first time, and was really blown away by it. It's
Truly.
so yeah. It is, and if anyone hasn't seen it, it's about his own particular memories of having been a part of the French chapter of ACT UP in
Hmm.
the early '90s, who did what ACT UP did in America, which was sort of pressuring pharmaceutical companies to really, and government policies or government agencies to work a little faster on getting medication to people suffering from HIV and AIDS.
AIDS movies tend to like inadvertently reinforce a conservative politics by desexualizing their subjects
Yeah,
in order to emphasize their victimhood. So I thought it was quite radical that we get to see this guy who's got like pneumocystis pneumonia, KS, body wasting away, and he's still portrayed as desirable
yeah,
through
and
the
getting an
eyes of his
awesome
lover.
hand job in the hospital.
He gets an awesome hand job from a
Yeah,
babe,
yeah.
and it's not a pity party. It's played for erotic effect.
It's also one of those brilliant movies that's just all conversations. You know, so much of the movie is in the meeting room where they get together and
Yeah.
they discuss things. I particularly love the little gal who's always just like, all right, let's take it to a vote, like the one who's keeping everything in line.
Hmm.
But I also love the fact that there are no judgments made about the conflicts between these people. You have people who are just never on the same page. They are frenemies. They always disagree, and it's so powerful that the movie is that for so long, and then he dies, and everyone comes over, and they all talk, and they smoke, and they say hello to his mom, and they just have this quiet, and it's so elegiac by the time we get to that point, and it
Yeah.
moves me so deeply, I wept just as much this time as I did the first time, and that's also where so much of the meaning of the movie comes in too.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's and also probably one of those movies you can use as an example for when people say, should someone who wasn't there or wasn't part of this make a movie about it, and you think, well, maybe, but it certainly does help to have somebody who's telling the story from the inside.
Well, because he captures all the complexity of it.
Yeah,
I found like don't make
because
you really
they're all like young, idealistic, beautiful people. At their most problematic, they're still, you know,
yeah.
sympathetic.
Yeah, and like the don't get me wrong, the David France documentary doesn't omit the conflicts and the differences of approach, but this movie really gets into it. Whether or not you should be shaking hands and sitting in boardrooms with people from big
Yeah,
pharma.
yeah,
Great movie.
so great.
Winning our jury prize, however, is Loveless by Andrey Zvyagintsev from Russia. This is a morality tale and chamber drama about how toxic home environments poison our children. And I guess in the bigger picture, it's about how Russian culture has become unloving and unfeeling, and how
Oh
that's
yeah,
setting
it's
up
become unloving and unfeeling. Sorry to all my Russian friends.
and how that's setting up the next generation for misery and emotional emptiness. This is a theme we've seen done better in The White Ribbon.
I'm surprised at how simplistic this movie is because Leviathan is my favorite movie of 2014. So he follows it up with this, and I could not have been more shocked by how much I did not enjoy this film. And on top of it, for it to take third prize, again, I know that the competition is not choking in this festival, but I still feel they could have done better.
It is a frumpy movie.
Yeah. And it's about cell phones.
Yeah. Oh, and then it has the worst crime of a movie. The very end of the movie, the mother who's lost. Spoiler alert! You're not going to watch it. The mother who's lost her son is wearing a Russian flag, uh, Russian flag adorned Olympian's athletic outfit,
Right.
while on a treadmill, and the camera zooms in on her, and then she looks at the camera.
Oh, yes.
Cut
That's right.
credits.
Yeah. It's insufferable. I didn't rewatch it for the show because I just couldn't do it. I told myself I
No.
would, and then I couldn't do it because I also remember. Isn't there a part where they close the door and the kid's crying behind it?
Yes.
It's basically the Pink family portrait video as a 2 hour movie.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. This movie was done better as "Oh Father" by Madonna.
yeah, because he's crying into the camera, right? Like he's looking at the camera crying. something like
Or
that.
at least facing the camera. He's front
Yeah,
and center.
yeah, it's like a World Vision commercial for 2.5 hours.
It
Yeah,
is. It's very
awful,
simple.
awful, awful.
Here's the portion of the episode where Bill and I argue. Winning Best Director is The Beguiled by Sofia Coppola. This is the first time in 50 years that a woman had won the award, and only the second time overall. Uh, I think that is still true.
I believe that is still true. Yeah,
Yeah.
even though two women have won the Palme d'Or, but yeah.
Coppola had been here before with Marie Antoinette. And I was surprised when going back and researching about this movie after watching it for this pod, how much backlash it had received. And it seems that most of it had to do with its relationship to the original movie by Don Siegel and the original novel. And before seeing the original, I just thought it had been, because I'm seeing it in a vacuum, I thought it was like this nuanced, suggestive but not obvious movie about a coven of Confederate dick pigs during the Civil War who take in an injured Yankee on paper because it's in their Christian charity to do so, but really do it for baser reasons.
Yeah.
And then I went back on your urging. I went back and watched the original. I watched it this morning, and I really just feel like these movies are apples and oranges, and it really feels like Coppola loves the original and thought it'd be really cool to do something completely different, not to correct the other, but to just do something different.
Well, and it's often spoken about as being her making it from the women's point of view, which is fine. You don't, I mean, especially if you're making a remake, you don't have to make the same movie. But
Yeah.
to me, I didn't feel backlash towards this movie personally. I just felt indifferent to it because there's so much bite to the original because it is this very like battle of the sexes story. You know, you and I were talking about this the other night. I just released an episode of BGM where we talk about the movie The Baby by Ted Post and how all these movies in the 70s were reacting to male paranoia over the advances of the women's lib movement. You know, and now that they're running our banks and they're becoming presidents of companies, will they still make me dinner? You know, and there was a segment of masculinity that was really threatened by this, and then there were movies that kind of made fun of this. And I feel like The Beguiled is with a winking eye, the Don Siegel film is making fun of this, particularly in putting this ubermensch tough guy Clint Eastwood, who can take out an entire nation of fighters with one gun, is put into a house with 6 women, and he thinks he's a fox in a hen house, and he finds out quite the opposite. And you have Geraldine Page as this really kinky personality, and these women they're like black Narcissus nuns, you know, they're just going mad with sexual frustration.
Oh yeah,
It's so interesting to me that Sofia Coppola's version, because she's not really a high conflict filmmaker anyway. Her movies are always played in a much softer, lusher tone.
true.
And I appreciate this attempt to make this sort of feeling of flowers in a hothouse that she has these girls as. And it doesn't have to be as overt as the original. But why does it have so little conflict? Why does it all feel so like Colin Farrell's rage at the end feels like it comes out of nowhere, and then the fact that he's not even a Yankee and he's a merchant soldier to justify his Irish accent doesn't really make all that much sense. And Colin Farrell, for all that he is like, you know, top 3 sexual fantasies of my life,
Oh
is
yes.
not someone I think of as like aggressive masculinity. You know, like it's not like you had, I don't want to say Vin Diesel, but somebody whose career plays in a more, you know, and like an action star. It's just interesting to me how phoned in Sofia Coppola's film feels. And you're going to give her a Best Director prize for what? She's made better movies. She also puts Nicole Kidman in a lead role, in a role that had she ratcheted it up to the level of crazy that Geraldine Page had in the original, Nicole would have been there for all of it and she would have delivered. We've seen her do it before.
In the
So it's like,
Northman.
why? Yeah. So, and in Stoker as well. So why aren't you exploring that aspect of the character? Why does everything just feel so pat and uh, like underwhelming? And Kristen Dunst too, like who's perfectly cast in the Elizabeth Hoffman Hartman role.
See, I felt very tense watching it. Like like this is a naturalistic movie about an ideological Eden that gets interrupted when Colin Farrell shows up with 3 buttons undone. And the fact that he's not that virile as Clint Eastwood certainly, I think, makes it even more emphatic about the fact that these women are so hot and bothered. I guess where I find the movie missteps is because of its approach, the Greek tragic ending like solving things with poison mushrooms. Hello, Phantom Thread.
Yeah.
It
Same
it's
year. Yeah.
yeah, it just makes the movie all of a sudden turns to Wicker Man instead of Picnic at Hanging Rock, which it's been for the first 60 minutes.
For sure. I
Um,
also don't think it's a terrible movie.
no, no,
And
no, no.
again, I don't mind her doing different. I just don't understand why she does less.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I will say the one area where she does, for me, cut a corner, and you wouldn't know this unless you read the Wikipedia page or you've seen the original movie, is she cuts out the black slave character,
Yeah.
which really brings the moral complexity to the movie. Now, if the choice of a director writer would be to take it out because their intention is to not represent experiences they don't know, I would respect that. I'd say, cool, you're just staying in your lane. But I think she's playing it safe by not showing this character who in any way could be perceived as being complicit with her enslavers, even though she's not,
Mm,
just because she tells the Yankee, you're just the same as all these other white rapists.
right. But again, this is why I don't understand why she's doing less. And then she doesn't have to do the threesome fantasy that's in the original. But why aren't we getting any indication of the fact that Nicole is also turned on by him? Why, why not give her that extra layer? And also in the original, they don't know what they're doing when they cut off his leg. Well, as in the remake, she's like consulting a book or whatever. It's like, why did you remove that level of ooginess? Because it makes you so squeamish in the original when they do
Totally.
that, and
Oh
it's
my God.
also so darkly funny. So it's like, why aren't you having more fun emasculating this guy?
Well, and they hold up the shadow of the saw in the original as they're about to take off his leg looks like
Yeah,
Nosferatu ascending the
yeah,
stairs.
yeah. And it's again, I just don't understand. Like, why is there less conflict? Why is there less problematic? Because that's the
Mhm.
juicy aspect of this story, is that it's like really scary and really fucking hot.
Oh yeah.
These women are being challenged on their morals and on their principles, and they just can't help themselves because it's been the Civil War. They've been eating a dirty radish every day for the last 3 years, and then a big dick comes into their house. Who could control themselves? And why isn't there more problematic sexuality? I don't know. Again, I don't think it's a terrible movie, but I don't understand why there's not enough. And given that the Best Director prize also often goes to a film that, while not always grand enough to be the Palme d'Or, is a movie where you just really go so far afield, you break
Right.
new ground, you have this level of style and control. It's also interesting to me that they give it to her, especially because, like, it's great. A woman won, great. But like, and I love Sofia Coppola, but it's just fascinating to me that they chose her. They would have been better off doing Lynn Ramsey.
So you ultimately your issue with this win is that this movie's really safe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting. On to Lynn Ramsey.
yeah.
In Best Actor, we've got probably a Career Achievement Award, let's be real. Joaquin Phoenix for You Were Never Really Here.
Did you watch the clip of when he won?
No, do I
And
have to?
well, it's just hilarious because he looks around for like 10 minutes. It's like, you don't know
Why?
your name in French? Like, what? Just get up there, and if you just say thank you and leave. Anyway,
Or talk about how we need to reconsider the food we eat. Uh,
it's just amazing to me that somebody who styles himself as out there to save the world cannot avoid making everyone else's day so much longer than it needs to be.
yeah, along with his Best Actor win for Joker, this feels like too little, too late. This guy has a hat trick of incredible performances in the early decade with The Master, Her, and Inherent Vice. Regardless of
Yeah.
what you think of Inherent Vice as a whole movie, he's incredible in it. And then by this point, he's getting recognition for these movies that are so forgettable and in performances that are so like thin
Yeah, absolutely.
and
And safe
underwritten.
as well. Like, they're so easily calculated. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gristly and beer bellied, and he has a beard.
Yeah. And this
Um,
movie also wins the. Doesn't it also share the jury prize?
no, it shares the
The
screenplay award.
screenplay prize. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, for being an anemic Mona Lisa.
Yeah, it's a beautifully shot movie. I like Lynn Ramsey a lot. I really
Me too.
like I like Ratcatcher. I really love Morven Keller and the Kevin movie.
Yeah,
So I was surprised that I didn't like this more. When this movie was over, I remember thinking I felt like we were still in the first act. I was
yeah,
surprised when it was over because it didn't feel like it had gone anywhere.
yeah. It felt to me like a it was in the nominees list for the long format music video Grammy.
That's right.
Yeah, winning Best Actress is the gorgeous Diane Kruger
Yeah,
for In the Fade, Aus dem Nichts by Fatih Akin.
yeah.
In accepting the prize, she acknowledged anyone who, like her character, has survived an act of terrorism and is trying to pick up the pieces and go on living after having lost everything. Please know that you are not forgotten.
Yeah. And because she's her, when she delivers that speech, it sounds like when the assistant to the head of the corporation is trying to give trying to say something to make the stockholders not feel nervous about the fact that someone just opened fire in their office the day before. She has that
Yeah.
vibe to her,
Yeah,
skinny,
she sounds
blonde, and
like
cold. Yeah.
the nice sister in Okja.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say this as a fan. I love Deanna Kruger, but yeah.
Oh, she's probably my favorite part of Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah.
This is a fine performance, and it's an entertaining movie,
Yeah.
though not a very memorable one.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's particularly because the ending is a bit too. It's unbelievably dramatically arch, and also done with so little humor that it's hard to swallow. I like Fatih Akin a lot. I think Head On is a masterpiece. I like The Edge of Heaven. This movie is. I don't find it insulting in its sort of easily delineated morality because it's done well enough, but it's also not fascinating either.
and admittedly, it could have been much, much worse than it
Oh
did. Point
yeah,
Blank. Like it,
yeah, yeah,
I thought it was going to end up. I thought it was going to finish on a cliche, and it didn't. So thank you
yeah,
for that.
yeah.
This movie did make me go texting my sister, who I share a similar morbid sense of humor with, asking her if women really check to see if they're on their period by touching their vagina and then holding their bloody fingers up to their face. And my sister said, usually you can just tell from the feeling of blood dripping from your pussy.
I forgot about that part. I also didn't rewatch this for this show. I didn't feel like it. I saw this at the Toronto Film Festival. It was when our friend still worked at the Elgin, when she ran the Elgin, basically. So I remember driving down and hiding in her sort of broom closet employee section. And then she got me like an awesome. I don't think they were doing assigned seating yet. So I think she got me like a really awesome seat in the
Ooh.
theater after. But yeah, because I got to go in ahead of the crowds. And that's the happy memory I have of this film. Otherwise, I can't say that it made that deep an impression.
Yeah, and it's got some needle drops that piss me off.
Yeah,
It wins the Needle Drop Award. We've already heard about You Were Never Really Here, but sharing the Screenplay Award with it in this competition was, I will now admit, a good movie. The Killing of a Sacred Deer by,
written by. Please
by
say the Greek names. I can't wait to hear
oh
this.
my
This is
god,
going to be
by
amazing.
Yorgos Lanthimos. Was that correct?
And the
Um,
screenplay prize is but for both of them. He is his
oh,
co-writer on all of
Jesus
his
Christ,
films.
let me try this. Ephemus Philippou.
Yeah, good enough. Yeah,
All right, thank
yeah,
you. And this is the one movie I had to watch twice for this pod because I was so tense and so undecided and so knotted about what I felt about it the first time. It is like it's something on the level of like the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie. It's just so out to confuse you and make you
yeah.
uncomfortable and not make you feel comfortable where not to not ingratiate you in any fucking way. And finally, I decided that that's what's successful about it.
Yeah, I think it's also a movie where like I figure out for myself what it's about, and everybody could disagree with me or say otherwise because it doesn't. It's certainly one of his subtlest films. It's the film that has the least amount of effort in sort of taking place in an alternate universe the way his films do. Um, but I love the sense of control to it. I love how
Mhm.
good it looks. This is Colin Farrell at his smoking hottest,
Agreed.
and it's a good year for him and Nicole together. They're in two films together at the festival. She's also in two films with Elle Fanning at this festival. And so yeah, it's and also I love Nicole's performance in this film. I love how like subtle and controlled she is. I love Alicia Silverstone in this movie as well. I think she's fantastic.
With wine teeth.
And it's before I was sick of Barry Keoghan, so I like him in this movie as well. I don't ever want to watch him eat spaghetti ever again as long as I live, but I love that. And then I also wonder how many people don't get this movie, or at least lose something from the meaning of this movie by not understanding the allusion to the myth of Iphigenia in the title. And
Mm.
they point out that the daughter wrote a essay on Iphigenia in her class when he goes to see the principal. And Ifienia is a story about the inability to compromise.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know this myth. We're going to cover it when we see the film of it in 1977. But
No, say some more.
basically, the myth is that someone killed Artemis's sacred deer, and as punishment, she made the wind stop blowing, which meant that Agamemnon could not sail his ships to Troy to recover Helen, who had just left his brother for Eric Bana. Was it Paris? I can't remember. And the gods, the oracle tells him, you have to sacrifice your daughter Iphigenia, and the winds will blow again. And his wife Clytemnestra says, "We're not fucking killing our kid so that your brother can get his whore back." But he does it, and the winds blow, and then Clytemnestra kills him in revenge, and their daughter Electra gets revenge on her. Right? Am I getting this right, or am I confusing my myths? So anyway. Um, so at the heart of it is this inability to compromise, and you have these characters in this film who cannot back down from what they want, and as a result, they're forced to lose something essential. Colin Farrell is the doctor who refuses to believe that he could do anything wrong, even though there is a suggestion that he might have had too much to drink when he performed heart surgery on Barry Keoghan's dad, and Keoghan's dad died. Who then says to him, your kids will keep getting sick until you kill one of your family members to make up for my dad dying." And you have Nicole as this character who's going to make whatever hard choice she has to keep life moving forward, and you have this young man whose sense of righting wrong is not balanced in any way by any kind of self-awareness. And so, in a way, you could say that Lanthimos is making this movie for this current world we live in, of this sort of angry online mob-style justice that we're all into, where
Hmm.
everything has to be atoned for, people have to be shamed publicly and all that stuff. But that's all my interpretation. I don't know that that's like a textbook reading of the film, and that's what I love about the movie, is that it doesn't make that so easy.
And it also has weird eccentricities that are not like essential to the plot, and I think trouble the interpretations one may make. Like
Yeah,
everything you say, everything you having just said, doesn't explain, for example, why the husband and wife play a little sex game called General Anesthetic.
I think about that all the time. I think that's it's so troubling and so fucking like
So funny.
hot and so funny. Yeah,
I know. It's
yeah,
all of those things.
yeah,
And it would be a very simple conflict if Barry Keoghan never hangs out with the family, but he's becoming almost like um, a boyfriend figure to the daughter at the same time that
yes,
he's killing her, and that
yeah,
is fascinating.
yeah, yeah,
So it ends up being a movie. Yeah, a movie of not. It's a story I'm not used to seeing,
yeah.
and it was a tension I couldn't put my finger on.
It's also an interesting examination of, like, what if an ancient myth took place in the modern day, without any comforting resolutions,
Mhm.
and where people do make these bizarre choices to appease the gods.
But not just people making bizarre people making bizarre choices.
Yeah.
This is what makes Lanthimos unique when he's good. Like I think of, there's the pop horror novelist Stephen King says that. Did you know who Stephen King is? He's a pop horror novelist. He says that he's
I was
always
like, what's pop horror? Anyway, go on.
he's always interested in putting ordinary characters in extraordinary circumstances.
Right. Yeah.
And Lanthimos goes one step further and says, let's put characters in extraordinary circumstances and see what they do, and then let's also make them wacky.
Yeah. 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 I haven't liked a movie more than this one since of his.
I
Even though I
would.
like The Favorite, but I like this one more.
I like The Favorite, but I don't want him working with Tony McNamara ever again.
Hmm.
Before we move on to our also rans, I just want to know, Bill, this was our awards winning roster. Were
Yeah.
there any glaring omissions from this list of winners? Movies you think deserved awards?
Oh yeah, I think Good Times should be in the awards. I think that would have been my jury prize over Loveless. Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, I
What
think my eyebrow dandruff would be my jury prize over Loveless, but yeah.
won't you speak on it? Let's talk about Good Time before we move into the rest of our list.
Well, this was for many of us the introduction to Josh and Benny Safdie, even though they had made films that were really popular in a cultish way, like Daddy Longlegs. I had never
Mhm.
seen anything earlier of theirs, and I actually saw this with. It was one of those nights where, like, everybody else chooses the movie and you just sort of go along with it. I wasn't interested in it, and I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It's a story about small time hoods, which is not really something I'm ever excited about. And I hadn't really been turned on to the finer points of Robert Pattinson's acting also when I saw it. So I was really, really impressed by how much he doesn't seem like a movie star slumming it in a slummy
Mm-hmm.
world in this film. I also forgot that when I rewatched it, I forgot that they were Greek in this movie. Um, but he and his brother do a botched job of robbing a bank, and we spend the rest of the movie watching him. Basically, well, because his brother gets arrested, and his brother, you get the impression he's like intellectually challenged in some way and hearing impaired, and he's trying to raise the money to get his brother out on bail. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the crazy things he does, and it's just one disastrous decision after another that spins out of control. And one of the things that's brilliant about this movie is just the way it looks, the way it
Mm-hmm.
captures this sort of like neon nighttime Queens, Brooklyn, wherever it is that they are, and then also just the fact that it's about people hard done by a society that doesn't care about them, but it's not moralistic in any way. It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't demand your sympathy for them or demand your judgment for them either. Like everything is just shitty, and that's just it's a this is how things are kind of attitude, which I really like. And then a great cameo by Jennifer Jason Leigh as a woman who won't get off her goddamn phone, which I just
Food on the table.
puts food on the table, young man. Spitting image, right?
Speaking image, right?
Give me the axe. Just give me the axe.
Yeah,
I agree with you. This movie, I watched this movie much later after I'd seen Uncut Gems and
Uncut Jams.
Uncut Gems, and I I am attracted. And my Venn diagram has movies like this right at its center, which is these non-moralizing movies about fuck ups with
Yeah.
shit luck.
Yeah,
And it feels like After Hours if the character only made shitty decisions.
yeah. Combined with the limited opportunity, like the limited choices he has to make, like
Yes.
it's -20 in New York in the wintertime, and so he has to find someone's house to go to with the with the wrong patient in the wheelchair in that brilliant sequence. You know, like it's so great.
And it's another example or another exhibit from this curiosity of mine as to how Pedro exercised no authority as jury president, because this movie has his taste written all over it. Pedro, who will humanize rapists and
Yeah,
incest and and murder,
yeah,
surely would have enjoyed this movie where this guy kisses someone who is like freshly pubescent,
yeah.
and it's
Which is why
not.
Jessica Chastain didn't want it to win
Yeah,
anything.
probably.
Yeah,
And it's not played up like Lolita, and
yeah,
it's not played for moralism either.
yeah, yeah,
It's just like, wow, this guy's a fucking piece of work.
yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
they also, and usually you also endanger that by having a heartthrob taking on a role that should be played by an unknown, and yet you don't get the feeling. It's not. He doesn't. Robert Pattinson does not have movie star syndrome in this movie. It's not like it's Cary Grant playing him. You know what I mean? He roughs himself up quite convincingly.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
it's a movie that has jury prize written all over it. It has prize energy.
Yeah, third
Yeah,
prize is always for the sophomore effort of a up and coming director that is smaller in scope and meets deliverables.
yeah, packs a punch.
Yeah.
Which is why Andrea Arnold won it 3 times. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Also in competition, we've got Amant Double, or Double Lover by François Ozon, who had been here before with Swimming Pool and Young and Beautiful and Everything Went Fine, the
Yeah,
last of which you like quite a bit.
I did. Yeah.
This movie is so bad and so stupid and not holding back on any of its obvious choices, including cross-fading a close-up of a speculum-enlarged vagina with a close-up of a human eye, that I find myself strangely admiring it.
I didn't think it was. I didn't. I would never call it awful, but I don't think it's great. I don't think it's good. Even I think it's a sexy erotic thriller that is very much let down by a weak conclusion. It is dumb. It's like if I always said it was like if Hitchcock directed 50 Shades of Grey. Uh, it doesn't have enough. It doesn't take enough fun in the opportunities it presents. First of all, I don't like that actress. She's also in Young and Beautiful. I find her kind of vacuous. I
Yeah.
love Jeremy Renier. This is him at his most attractive, and Ozon likes him. He works with him quite a bit, and it's just amazing to me that. And it's a movie about like she has a psychiatrist, but she wants to fuck him, so she goes to another psychiatrist who turns out to be his evil twin brother. It's amazing to me that this film does not have more fun indulging. Maybe there's the limitation placed on it as being adaptation of a Joyce Carol Oates story. I don't know, but yeah, I don't think it's good.
It would be in the running for the dance for me if it was not so entertaining
Yeah,
of a mess. And it does check off two of Mike's favorite tropes, which is bitches be crazy and women. Am I right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Then we've got The Day After by Hong Sang-soo.
yeah.
This is my first Hong Sang-soo movie, and it's totally fine. It felt like one of the plot threads in an ensemble movie by Woody Allen from the 80s.
Yeah, and that's how all of his movies are. He makes like 7 of them a year, and it's always like just this simple setting, conversations between people. They run into each other on the street. They go for a drink. They bring up a past woe of some kind. I find that my favorites of his are from an earlier part of his career rather than the more recent years. Uh, he's like and they call him the Korean Eric Romer, because of these like very simple slice of life movies that he makes
Mhm.
prolifically. Night and Day is my favorite of his. That's the one I would recommend people start with. But I've only seen one of the 3 movies he made with Isabel, and this one is far from my favorite. But I do enjoy it. I find there is like a sort of like brittle sense of humor, and he always casts. Oh fuck! I forgot her name. But the woman who plays the new employee is always in his
Yeah,
movies. I think she might be his partner in real life. I don't know, but she's his muse for sure, and
yeah.
she's great.
Well acted, well written. I like the nods to Ozu.
Yeah,
I like the profile shots of people eating at a table.
I prefer his movies when they're about nothing, but they're really like atmospherically resonant, like On the Beach at Night Alone
Mm.
is a good one for that.
I will admit this is not that atmospheric. It's pretty small.
No, yeah, yeah.
We were not able to procure a copy of A Gentle Creature by Sergei Loznitsa, unless Bill, you've seen it before.
I have, but I thought you said you found it on Daily Motion.
I did, but then it didn't have subtitles.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Loznitsa's follow up to My Joy, which I thought was a masterpiece, which was his first feature film after years of documentaries. He continues to make documentaries. As I pointed out, he sat behind me at one of his documentaries and wouldn't stop talking, which was amazing. Gentle Creature is a huge letdown for me, about as big a letdown as Loveless. It's about a woman who had sent a care package to her husband in prison, and it's returned as undeliverable. So she undertakes a very, very lengthy train journey to get to the prison and finds it impossible to just make an appointment to see him. She's rerouted by a lot of bureaucracy, and it has his skill for making these like events flow from one to the other, where everything feels like a strange nightmare. But it has a preachy tone, quite frankly, that it never lets up on. And then it ends with a dream sequence that I found fully patronizing. I was very disappointed by this film.
Oh, glad I missed it then, because it's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We know I love torture. And then in our second feature in Isabel Watch,
Isabel Watch, Isabel Watch, Isabel Watch.
we've got Happy End by Michael Haneke.
Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. Just think of that. Yeah.
Isn't he happy though?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is the last movie of his we've had for a while, and
And I worry that it's the last one we'll ever have. This movie came out 7 years ago. He's like 84 now. And if Michael Lee is having trouble getting movies made, I doubt Hanukkah's having that much easier a time. He might not be well. I don't know. I'm happy to be wrong. Make another movie, but I get the impression that this might be the last of it. It comes out a full 5 years after Amour, which was his biggest triumph internationally. Partly because he was working on another project that didn't pan out. He was trying to make a movie about a flash mob or something that didn't work out, and so he ended up making this film. It's kind of an unofficial sequel to Amour, because the characters have the same names, although the names are moved around to different characters. And it's a huge disappointment. This movie is beautifully shot, as all his films are. It
Yeah.
revisits themes that have already been done in his films and in ways that are not particularly inventive or creative. And it all just feels super low stakes and familiar. And I was shocked because his movies are always so impressive. They're just so impressive.
Yeah, just like the Lynn Ramsey movie, I kept waiting for this movie to begin, and then the credits were rolling.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, if I had made Code Unknown, Cache, The White Ribbon, and Amour, I would think that I've
And the piano teacher.
and The Piano Teacher, like it's okay if he phones it in, given the brilliance that he has put across. But I was surprised at how underwhelming this movie was.
Yeah, I was shocked. I thought that it was a little too on the nose with its messaging. It's also of a piece with these other movies about the moral corruption of the bourgeoisie, and just
Yeah.
like all the other mid movies in this competition, it doesn't say anything new about that topic.
Yeah, and that even this, he often creates these brilliant sequences of unease, and even that just feels very predictable. Like the guy who brings in the immigrants at the end at the party and everything. Like, I don't know, it just felt really rote. I
Yes.
like the little girl though. Isabel's good, although she's kind of phoning in the same performance she gives in all of his movies. It's the first time I ever saw Franz Rogowski, and I had been hearing a lot about him. I'd been hearing about this famous karaoke sequence, which is really not that much to rave about. Um, and I didn't get any impression of him, and I realized when I rewatched it, it's because he's dubbed. He's not. That's not his voice speaking in
Mhm.
French because he's a German actor. So I didn't really get a strong impression of him until I watched him in other stuff.
Then we've got Jupiter's Moon by watch me try to do Hungarian. Kornél Mundruczó.
I think that's where Mundruczó most famously recently made Pieces of a Woman with Vanessa Kirby.
Oh yes, and
Yeah.
didn't he also make Tender Son, the Frankenstein project?
Yeah, which I didn't see, but I have seen Delta, which is about a brother and sister who fall in love.
This is a first draft of a movie.
Yeah, it is. That guy's really cute. It's a movie about the migrant crisis, I believe, right?
If you want to be so generous, I mean that's a
Right.
topic in it, but I don't know if it's really about that.
Well, sure. Well, I don't really know what it's about. He gives this character this strange magical power to fly,
To levitate,
to
yeah.
levitate, which I love those scenes. Like, I love looking at them. But ultimately, I can't say that this movie really felt like it was about much.
No, it doesn't end up saying anything interesting about the migrant crisis. Usually, sci-fi movies use a extraordinary tropic convention to reveal something about society. You know, it's speculative fiction, and this just feels like the children of men you can afford.
And it doesn't help that the main character, who is like exploiting him, although in a way that I don't understand,
Yeah.
he's also a real pain in the ass. He's not an anti-hero. He's just a shitty character. Like, I find him like the magic character is far too passive, and the main character is too much of an asshole. And I can't really land with anyone in this film. The main character is also somebody who is dubbed by another actor, and that also kind of gets in the way. He's I believe, a
Mhm.
Georgian actor.
I also don't understand why whenever he's levitating, he's moving his arms like he's dancing to trance music.
I know, it drove me crazy too, because he's basically being strapped to a device, and the director's telling him to do that. That's what it looks like whenever he does that. Yeah.
Yeah, like either you have the superpower or you don't, but he's making it look like he's treading water.
Yeah, a movie that has some impressive, lengthy scenes that seem like they're all done in one take,
Hmm.
but ultimately one that just it doesn't really mean anything to me.
Agreed.
And one that feels like the director is pretending to make this movie about big themes, but he's actually just celebrating his own ability to create cool sequences.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Great steady cam photography, though.
Oh yeah.
From Noah Baumbach, we've got, and from Netflix, the Meyerowitz stories, new and selected.
Yep.
A movie that I enjoyed enough, but is not without its flaws.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever hated anything of his. I like his vibe. I like his sort of like witty New York intellectual repartee,
Hmm.
especially now that we don't get that from Woody Allen anymore. It's
Yeah,
nice to have Noah Baumbach, but there are other movies of his I like more than this. There are some that I like less than this one as well. The
yeah.
Meyerowitz stories to me is always my textbook example of the fact that while I am glad that Netflix is giving these carte blanche deals to all these great filmmakers who I want to keep working, they also don't come down hard enough on limiting time, like lengths of the film, because you're not worried about theatrical
Mhm.
distribution. You're not worried about it playing 5 times a day in the theater. So you have a lot of their direct to Netflix movies that always feel like they have a little bit of extra fat on them, much to the detriment of the overall project. And this one is always like the movie that I watched that made me realize this, and so as a result, it's sort of the definition of that problem.
Yeah, it's the blank check problem with that
Yeah.
company.
Although I'd rather that than that he's shopping this project around for like 10 years and still not able to make it. I get why
Mhm.
Netflix is valuable for this.
Yeah, it's still, it doesn't have smooth transitions. There are time lapses where it takes me a while to figure out what's just happened. But I believe the relationships between all the actors, and I love Elizabeth Marvel in it.
Yeah.
Then we've got our probably most expensive movie in the list, and this is Okja from Netflix and directed by Bong Joon-ho, who would be
Yep.
back with Palme d'Or winner Parasite. The audience, I mean, we've already said this enough. The audience booed this movie when it came out. It
When
was
it
the main,
started. Yeah. When it started.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was the main talking point of the festival. How Cannes as an organization would tolerate streamers.
Yeah. And I find it hard to believe that it wouldn't have won an award had it not been a Netflix movie. I feel like that really did work against its favor. This feels like a Best Director prize or a jury prize to me.
For me, it's definitely a technical prize
Yeah.
for the visual effects, because I do believe this super pig can emote and has
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
But I also would have accepted a punk Best Actress win for this child actress. I thought she was incredible.
Well, I'm not particularly inspired by Deanna Kruger in The Fade, so yeah, why not? Yeah, this movie's main disappointment for me is the ending. I find the ending to be really simplistic
Yes.
and negates everything that came before it, and it's a shame because up until that point, I was verging on like a 5-star review. Particularly the sequences, like the pig running through the streets of
Oh yeah.
Seoul, like it's incredible how well it's done. And then by the end, I was like, oh, you really watered everything down to something so much simpler than what came before it.
I agree. It turns into something much more pat. It's also not really clear in the end what it wants to say about its topic. And I tend to think that I don't know if it's Bong Joon-ho's fault as a director or the fault of the actors, that these otherwise good actors continue to be bad in his movies. Like I'm talking about American actors.
I think it's
So
because he doesn't speak English.
yeah, but I'm also wondering if Jake Gyllenhaal and Paul Dano, who's not a good actor on the record, I wonder if they're like, oh, good, my chance to work with the Snowpiercer guy, and then they just go for something really ham-fisted. It's
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
it's a cartoony kind of acting style, and I don't like it. It's very much at odds with these beautiful, tranquil scenes between the grandfather and the granddaughter.
Yeah.
And then,
Oh, you know what? I just realized we forgot to take the note that we got from your brother.
oh,
There is actually a handsome gay man in the Roseborough family, and welcome Fraser Roseborough. Is it Fraser or Fraser? I've never met him.
yeah. So, I think you're supposed to pronounce it Fraser if there's no
Okay,
I, and then if it's like the TV show pronunciation, the pronunciation is Fraser.
right,
But
or
my family just,
Frazier. Yeah.
our last name was also misspelled because like illiterates moved across the Atlantic, so
All right.
we just had to do it differently and call him Fraser, even though his name is spelled Fraser.
But he suggested that we have to remember to say the name of the movie at the end of our review as well, which is also a problem I have with the film comment podcast. So it is actually a note well worth taking. So that was Okja.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
Okja.
Thanks for listening, Frage.
And we're gonna go on to Redoubtable, or Godard Mon Amour by Michel Hazanavicius.
Yeah. Le Redoubtable.
Yes, who we know for The Artist and The Search and The Most Precious of Cargoes. And this movie shocked me. When it first started, I thought this is going to be a really pat and obvious approach to a movie about a French New Wave director by being made in the French New Wave style. And then it stops being, it turns into something else halfway through that's much more interesting when we're getting into the 1968 riots.
Yes. I really love this movie. I don't know that I think it's great. I don't know that Michel Hazanavicius has ever made a great movie, but I always enjoy them at their lightest and most unimportant. I really enjoy them. And they look great and they play great. I've never
Mhm.
found any of them boring. And that's how I feel about this movie. I think a lot of people had a problem with it because it is kind of a biopic and so they expect something weightier and they don't really accept the light tone that it takes. But I think first of all, I love the way it looks. I like that he doesn't include what made Godard great as a filmmaker, except in the way that he films this movie, in the way that it looks. It's based on Anne Wiazemski's memoir of having been married to Godard from the late 60s until she actually divorced him in the late 70s, although I think they had split up a long time before they legally divorced. I also enjoy this movie because it captures Godard in exactly the way that I've always pictured him, as this son of privilege. He came from a wealthy Swiss financier family, raised in France. The kind of guy who's always talking a big game about workers' rights, but who is also going to burn a store down if it doesn't have his preferred brand of imported cigarettes for him to buy,
Totally.
and who is actually well meaning and actually smart, really well read, but impractical and kind of a misfit, and always working a bit too hard to compensate for the fact that he's just not cool. His movies are cool and they're liked by cool people, but he himself is kind of a dweeb and he's not self aware about it, and he makes everyone around him suffer as a result. Karina talked about the fact that he was emotionally abusive. We see that in this movie. Whenever he feels small, he takes it out on her. He's had other relationships with people where he just cuts off friendships for no reason. We also have the ending of Faces Places. He's a pain in the ass, but he makes
Yeah.
up for it by making all these great movies. And I feel like Louis Garrel captures this sort of like impish brattiness about him perfectly. And then, of course, Godard was still alive when this movie was made, and he said that he thought it was just a really, really dumb idea for a movie. But I really enjoy it, and I get why he would not like its portrayal of him. But I love it.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be far fetched to give Garel the Best Actor prize for it because he's really carrying the movie. He's doing all the work.
Yeah, yeah, and also capturing that sort of middle ground between insufferable and sympathetic. You can't outright hate him. I love that part where he's trying to like control the chant in the protest,
Oh my
and
god,
it's just
yes.
like you're not at the forefront of this, buddy. Like it's not
Yeah.
actually about you.
I love that he's always breaking his glasses or losing his glasses.
So funny.
Any excuse to show Louis Garrel naked, I'm
I
on board
know.
for.
He is very sexy. For a man with that many moles, he's very sexy. He is right in being sympathetic to the political situation that he's in, but he is far too desperate to be the one to have the take on it that everyone goes by, that defines the era, that defines the movement, and he just can't be that person. And it's his tragic flaw, basically. Also, that his ideals are impractical, that he creates this sort of like collective from which to make films, and it's just chaos. It's just like there's not going to be a director in charge. Everyone gets to have an opinion. We have meetings in the morning before we start shooting, and all those movies that he made in the 70s that I've never seen. And it's just people arguing, and nothing gets done.
Which reminds me of Occupy Wall Street.
Right.
Trying to employ a truly democratic process and then finding out what chaos truly ensues.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to knock like Occupy Wall Street, like it was a really that's not what undid it. It was that overnight
Yeah, of course. But
idea.
all these things, I mean, everything, religion,
Yeah,
communism, like all these ideals, all these systems that will create a utopia are always undone by the fact that you're giving a great idea to a human being to enact and process. And so obviously it's not going to come out because at the end of the day, we're all a bit too nervous about the fact that we have short lifespans and that we are vulnerable, mortal, and that we are afraid of being alone.
hmm.
And that was Godard Mon Amour. High
That was
five.
Godard Mon Amour. The other biopic in this competition
Oof.
in tones of sepia and butterscotch and clay
Yeah.
is Rodin by Jacques Doillon.
Doyon.
Doyon, okay. Who had been here before with La Drôlesse and La Pirate.
Yeah. Most famous for the movie Ponette in
Oh,
1996.
yeah. That
Yeah.
little girl looked so much like the adoptive daughter of Tony on Blossom.
Yeah, she was great. She won Best Actress at Venice, I believe, for that movie when she was 4 years old.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And then she was in Chocolat with Juliette Binoche. Why can't you wear black shoes like all the other mothers?
And this movie takes the prize for I'm so sick of tits.
Yeah, and also another movie where I'm like, why did you make this? What's it about? Like, it's interesting that what's his name,
Vincent
Vincent
Lindon.
Lindon, or as you like to call him, Load Number 8 in your Treasure Island media experience of the day. That he does such a good job of truly making you believe that he's sculpting. You've already had Rodin portrayed in many movies, which are always from the point of view of Camille Claudel, because that's the interesting part of the story, is this sort of conflict between two lovers and colleagues. Now we're making a movie from his point of view, but it doesn't reveal anything all that different from what I already know about him from the other films. So then it's just like, why did you make this? It's boring. It's colorless, is what it really is. And I just had to sort of get through it.
It was close to being in the running for the dance for me. It's a Wikipedia page with barely a pulse,
Yeah,
which
and
brings
that
us,
was Rodin.
and that was Rodin. Uh, this brings us to my and your picks for the Dinde d'Or, the Golden Turkey.
The Golden Turkey.
Bill, won't you speak about your choice?
My choice for worst in show was Naomi Kawase's Radiance. We talked about Kawase when we did The Morning Forest, the one time that she won a major prize. This is a film I like even less, which is about a woman who has been assigned the task of writing the narration for films whose soundtracks have been modified for the visually impaired. And she screens them for a focus group who give her feedback, and she gets into a relationship with this sort of curmudgeonly blind photographer who is very bitter after having lost his sight as an adult. And then we just watch all this cheap sentimentality, including two people who become best friends over the fact that they both love sunsets. I mean, it's just I don't get what's going on with this lady and why she makes these chicken soup for the soul movies, or why anyone likes them. But I don't know, maybe it's just a whistle I can't hear. I think this movie's terrible.
It kind of felt like the menu in a hotel room TV set. Just like images kind of floating by, or like
Yes.
something that plays during karaoke.
Yeah.
No, it's a good pick. It's pretty bad. And then I'm going to woefully give my choice for the Dinde d'Or to a movie by a director I love,
Yeah.
and that is Wonderstruck by Todd Haynes.
Yeah. A rare misfire for him, and one that I seriously considered for my pick. Like, it was six of one and a half dozen of the other.
This director has undeniably touched five-star glory no fewer than four times.
Yeah,
I,
which is why I give him a pass on having really fumbled one.
yeah, I just did not know that he had the capacity to make something this mistaken, and to direct a child this untalented.
Oh my god, that kid is awful, and I feel bad saying shit about a kid. The girl is great, the one who ended up in A Quiet Place. I think she's great.
Sure.
But the boy is terrible. And I agree with you. Like, Todd Haynes, they're not all Far From Heaven. They're not all May December. But the ones I don't like, I'm just sort of indifferent to. Like,
Mhm.
I think Velvet Goldmine's really cool, but I don't think it's a great movie. I think I'm Not There is really interesting, but I don't think it's a great movie. And Poison as well.
Mhm.
Um, and this is the only one where I'm like, head in my hands. What the fuck am I watching? I saw this at like 9 a.m. at the Lightbox because it was one of those secret screenings for members where you don't know what movie you're seeing when you get there. That my dear friend Helen, who is a listener, took me to. And I always feel terrible when I hate a movie that Helen takes me to because she's so generous in taking me. That's me acknowledging our listeners, our one of our two listeners, my friend Helen and your brother. And I was also really happy when the secret movie turned out to be one that I really wanted to see by a director that I loved, and I was shocked at how much I hated it.
It is strangely bad.
Is it based on a graphic novel? Is that what I recall? It's based on a book. And
It's based
it's based on a popular property anyway. It's adapted from something that is like well liked.
Yeah, a kid's mom dies, and he goes to the Big Apple to find out who his real dad is. And along the way, he meets some interesting characters, including a silent film actress who he finds out he has some kind of special connection to.
And then Julianne Moore is the silent film actress and the daughter.
That's right.
Is that what it is? Yeah. And she wears a
Yeah.
fake nose. And she got into a lot of trouble for the fact that she's not hearing impaired playing the role. But like, when the movie's this bad, who cares?
Yeah, but that was just that year. People were trying to. That was the hanger on of the same argument about The Shape of Water.
Right.
What are the biggest challenges in running a museum?
We're a museum of modern and contemporary art, so we need to present art that is the art of today, art that is absolutely cutting edge, and the competition is fierce. If you place an object in a museum, for instance, if we took your bag and placed it here, would that make it art?
Okay.
Moving on to our Palme d'Or winner, The Square, aka The Shooting of a Fish in a Barrel.
I was also shocked by how underwhelmed I was by this movie. I was thrilled. Like the night I saw it, I was so excited, partly because I'm excited to watch a Palme d'Or, partly because Force Majeure was one of those movies I just could not stop raving about. I'm so deeply in love with that film. It's still my favorite of his.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then, I really liked Triangle of Sadness as well. So it really is shocking to me. But then when I hear these interviews with Pedro Almodovar, with talking about the state of the world today in this very old man way, I'm like, well, no wonder you think this movie is groundbreaking. I think it has some really cool sequences, but ultimately what it has to say, criticizing the preciousness of the art world, isn't really all that unique or interesting or provocative.
Yes, so for the listeners who are not initiated with this movie, I'd be a bit surprised if you were not, though. It made a splash beyond the Cannes Film Festival. It got the nomination for the Foreign Language Film Award, though it did not win. This is a send-up of the contemporary art world about the chief curator of a major art gallery whose public profile as a professional and an intellectual takes a nosedive after a series of PR gaffes. The movie is a grand call-out of the insincerity and exploitation of the world of fine art, in particular its cultural political mandate to transform the world by mirroring it. We witness a litany of floating signifiers and mundane objects exhibited and lit to raise the question, what is art? The joke being that you usually have to read the artist's statement in order to comprehend what you're looking at.
Right.
The problem is, though, Bill, this movie's come out 16 years after we already got The Tampon in the Teacup and Mirror Father Mirror.
Yes. Yeah, and Tracy Emin, and decades after the urinal. You know, like it's
Beverly
such
Hills
a.
Cop, French and Saunders, Kids in the Hall.
And also, who's worried about this? You know what I mean? Like when it comes to the rarefied world of fine art, how much does it get in my daily life or anybody's daily life, other than the people who work in that world, and then the rich people who purchase from that world as a signifier of their wealth and people I don't have anything in common with? How much do I give a shit that when I go to a foreign city and visit a museum twice a year, that this is something I really need to be particularly worried about, that I need to see satirized and lampooned in this very low-hanging fruit kind of way? You know, they make fun of the ice bucket challenge at the beginning. There is this sort of very basic taking on of ideas of masculine ego, like the fact that he is robbed by those people at the beginning because of the fact that he's so into how helpful he is being to this desperate woman. If you told me that this movie was compiled from a series of ideas in a notebook without it being really like tied together, I would fully believe you.
Completely.
Like, guess what? We're all animals, Greg. Did you know this? We're all animals.
and I liked Triangle of Sadness. A second viewing revealed more of its flaws to me, but
Sure.
I still really enjoyed it. And I was probably the person laughing the loudest in the theater when I went to see it.
Well, it's also a movie that is much more relevant to the things we talk about. You know, the fact that people think that if you give power to the right people, that the world will be a great place. And this movie says, no, power is always something abused by people who step into a vacuum and take advantage.
Completely. And Triangle of Sadness also is so daring as to make us watch people barf and shit for 15 straight minutes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel wasted for a minute. Whereas this movie spends about the same amount of runtime showing us nothing all that interesting. A chase through apartment complex to find somebody who stole a phone.
Well, and that whole story, and then like when he gets in trouble with a little kid because the kid is mad at him for getting him in trouble with his parents, and I'm like, this is not one of those inevitably complicated situations. Just tell the kid that you put a letter in everyone's door to catch the robber, and now you've caught the robber, and you don't need him anymore, or just throw the kid out. It's not that hard to grab him by the shoulders and lock him out of the front door of your apartment building.
Yeah,
His
contrived.
his sort of feeling of helplessness is not something that I was in any way sympathetic to.
A smarter movie also would have shown us good art. Like, this movie makes its argument based on only showing us obvious shitty art and making jokes that any average person who doesn't go to art galleries would make about art.
Yeah,
I will say it has a couple of moments that are truly funny, like
the Tourette's guy.
I was thinking about the vacuuming of the gravel piles.
Oh, hysterical. Hysterical. And also, like, he's a genius at creating these situations where, like, everything is normal, but then one thing just goes out of whack and it comes to define the whole thing, like the Tourette's guy.
Hmm.
Which is that I find that sequence really funny because of the way people are reacting to it.
Yeah, and I think when the movie is working, it's doing a really good job poking fun at the manners of the
Yeah.
professional class. Like, the scene where everybody is just waiting for the chief curator to finish speaking to run to the buffet.
So great. Yeah.
It is, but it's only a handful of ideas, not worth the film length, and
Without a doubt.
and it would be done better as a Bizarro comic in a Saturday paper.
Some of the sequences are flat out boring. Like, we spend way too much time with those guys who work at the museum, the ones who are coming up with the social media idea. And like, why does the blown up baby ad happen just because he missed one meeting? Like, what level of approval process is there that's sped up so fast in this museum that he missed one meeting and an entire commercial happened that he didn't approve?
I also wholly do not believe that he would, because he's going through other stresses, just like flat out approve things. He'd say like, "Send it to me. I will, and I will take a look at it."
Right.
I just don't believe that. I think, to this movie's credit, it is barely held together by a great central performance by Shaez Bong.
By who?
Isn't it?
What did you just say?
You say it, I'm not repeating.
No, I said his name rhymes with Shays. I didn't say his name was Shays.
Oh, well, then you confused me, because I was like, why the fuck would it be spelled with an L then? It's phonetic. Okay, so it's
because it looks like Klaas or Klaes, but it's Klaes. It's, from what I understand from my internet search, it's Klaes or Klaes, probably depending on where in Sweden you're from.
Okay.
Klaes Bang or Bang.
Okay.
I think it's Bang. Yeah.
Okay.
Who is, I mean, bang me one more time, buddy. This is the gay porn Dominic West, which is why it's funny that Dominic West is also in this movie for 3 seconds. He is so ridiculously handsome. He looks so good in a suit. He's one of those guys where if he had garlic breath, I'd be like, I'll take it. It's fine. And I also love that he has bad teeth, because men with perfect faces are always made that much hotter by having like one flaw. And in his case, it's bad teeth. And I don't want him to fix them.
It's the kind of hot person that makes me want to completely redo my wardrobe.
Yeah.
They're obviously better looking than us, but for a moment we're like, oh, maybe I should start wearing more suits.
Yeah, yeah. But you settled for Botoxing your asshole, and that was good enough. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Bill, I've got nothing else I can say about this movie. What about you?
Yeah, same. I mean, like I said, I find that there's a lot of filler to it. It makes me think about things, but not in any profound or challenging way. The most famous sequence is the one in the poster, which is Terry Notary as the sort of gorilla man, which is like, yeah, like I get what you're going for, that these people think that they have control over this world of endless expression and the luxury of fine art, and think that they know where the line is, but the line's going to be moved for them. But it doesn't really, I don't know. It's a brilliant movie if you're simple enough for it, which I'm sorry to say to anybody out there who loved it. Like, and I don't understand why that fight happens with Elizabeth Moss after they have sex, where she finds him in the museum and argues with him. It's like, did you just need her to have one more scene in the movie for the financiers? Like, that scene doesn't really make enough sense to me.
The monkey in the apartment is also a wanker moment.
Yeah, and the condom scene, which where he doesn't want her to throw out the condom. Again, themes of modern day alienation, about sex with strangers and stuff, but it's just all very simple to me.
And it's too bad, because at times I can tell that the director did his research. Like, the fact that they would be throwing some kind of dance party in the museum.
Right.
Like, I've been to dance parties at the AGO in Toronto.
Right, me too.
Because they have to find creative ways to
get people in the space. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It also just doesn't help that he's not a well-meaning guy who keeps trying and failing. He just flat out does the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go find your kids, so you just grab a homeless man and ask him to watch your shopping bags in a shopping. Like, why? Like, why does he do that? That's a dumb thing to do.
Yes.
And so, like, why do you think I'm going to be on board for this when you're always doing the flat out wrong thing?
Yeah. Agreed.
Anyway, so yeah, I don't get what again with what Almodovar said about watching movies on a big screen. This is a big screen movie, and whatever it does have to offer is the impressiveness of the imagery when you do see it in a movie theater.
And it's grand.
Yeah, it's unapologetically cinema. It is not a story. It is not an experience that can be told in any other format, in any other way. And so I could see how everyone on the jury would have a reason to admire it in some way. But I think it's, I think it's a really phoned in film.
And I'm getting the picture of a filmmaker who isn't interested in any way in identifying with his political targets. And that for me is intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need to ask you if you think the right movie won the Palm. So won't you tell our listeners what movie you do think deserves the Palm this year?
Well, I've only raved about one since we started, and that was BPM. I think BPM is one of the best movies of the year. I think it definitely should have won the Palme d'Or. They have picked historical epics before, and particularly ones that are atypical. The fact that it is really reverential about the history, while at the same time very hip and modern. Even though those dancing sequences are beautifully shot, and I also never fully believe that we're at a nightclub in those sequences, but I do love them. But I do, and I love all the characters. I love everybody in it. I love all the personalities. Adele Ayanel is who we talk about all the time. How much I love her, and the snotty lawyer from Anatomy of a Fall is so great. By the way, has a full head of hair. I don't know. It's a choice. The baldy thing that he does in all these movies is a choice. I just was looking at his Instagram a minute ago. He's on stage with Isabella right now in somewhere in Asia. They're doing the Glass Menagerie.
Ooh.
So yeah, I love that film and look forward to watching it yet again at some point.
I have to agree with you, Bill. Sorry to be boring. I don't think there's a lot of competition for the Palm this year. Certainly not as much as there is for the Dand. BPM is the one that most feels like a Palm. It's big. It's big theater cinema. It's a movie you need to see on a big screen. It deals with big themes. It has an epic scale. It's rich with meanings that are so multiple you'll find more when you rewatch it. The only other movie that comes close to it in likability is not a Palm winner for me, and that's Good Time. Good Time is a great jury prize winner for me.
Yeah, and Killing of a Sacred Deer is a great screenplay winner.
Agreed.
Or it could have been a Best Director as well.
And Bill, if you could pick any movie from 2017, what would it be? The movie to win your Palm.
The movie to win my Palm, my number one film of the year, of course, was Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread. 2017 was a rough year for me. I saw a lot of movies that I liked, but I just couldn't find a Best Picture anywhere until that movie finally came out, and I just knew unequivocally that it was my number one of the year. It's beautiful and funny and smart, and it's just incredible.
Chic. That word should be dragged out into the street and killed.
Oh, and Leslie Manville sipping on that teacup.
Oh my gosh, do not pick a fight with me. You will not survive.
Yeah, so great.
And
a movie that truly you cannot predict where it's going to go next.
No, you can't. You don't know when she starts to poison her husband. Spoiler alert. That it's going to be played for laughs and that he's going to like it.
And also, again, in this day and age where all the conversations online about relationships are always about aggressors and victims, and you make this great movie about people who give as good as they get, it's actually quite, it's daring in this time to suggest the possibility that two people participate in a semi-abusive and yet equally loving relationship.
And it has production design and costume design you just want to reach out and touch.
Yeah, where it's not just about beauty. The costumes, I think, deserved the Oscar that year, in part because the clothing is a character in that film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great choice. It was my number one movie that year as well, but memory works differently than you'd think, and my choice for the Palm would go to a documentary because the movie I most love from 2017, as it turns out, is Faces Places.
Interesting.
I know.
That's the first time you've fully shocked me with your choice.
Yeah. If you told me that this is not even close to the best of Varda's works, or even Varda's documentary work, just her documentary work, I would probably agree with you. The Gleaners and I is better, but I love this movie so much. This movie, the fact that they're just wheat pasting blown up photographs on the sides of buildings should be cornball as all get out for me.
No, but
I
it's so
should.
moving.
It's
The
so
reactions of
moving.
these people seeing themselves, these people who have gone through their lives not hating themselves, but just thinking of themselves as like
Small.
just another person in a village. And
Yeah.
then the reactions they have to feeling so important and singled out is great.
It's a beautiful love letter to labor, to traditional practices of labor, to societies that have not completely post-industrialized, to into communities who really don't have a sense of the world outside of themselves.
I love Varda. I love her features and I love her documentaries. She was always a great feature filmmaker. I think Vagabond is her masterpiece. But her documentaries is where you see that she was actually a genius. It's her
Yes.
documentaries reveal that she was a genius. And that's also why it makes sense that even though she was a member of the French New Wave, that her lionizing happens later, because it's when she makes her documentaries that you realize that this is somebody who's operating on a godlike level. And I don't mean this in any way a derogatory way. Her documentaries to me are all parts of a whole.
Hmm.
It's all this, it's different chapters of the same movie, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. It's again somebody whose world I love to be in. The spontaneity of the way she makes documentaries, the way that she captures people at their most candid, and it's charming without being twee. Like I love daguerreotypes a lot. That's probably my favorite of the docs of hers that I've seen. I like The Gleaners and I too. I haven't seen The Beaches of Agnes yet. I have it on a stick that I haven't watched. I've had it there for years. But yeah, Varda is magnificent.
And do you know if she has journals or writings available in a compilation?
I do not know one way or the other. I know that Criterion just put out a box set of her complete works,
I
but
mean, I would love to get a hold of that, but I really would love to have like a collected works of Agnes Varda, because her documentaries are all like essays,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she just, her writing style as a filmmaker is just drips and drabs. It's just, I had a thought about this, and then I
yeah,
had a thought about this,
yeah.
and they all feel so profound. They're like haikus.
Yeah, she's great. She also has a lovely daughter who always likes my posts whenever I post anything about her mom on Instagram, which I always find really sweet.
That's so touching.
Yeah,
Well, Bill, this has been an
long.
experience talking about all of these movies. Won't you tell our listeners what we have to look forward to for our next episode?
Well, hey, Mama, we're going back to the 60s. We will be talking about Luchino Visconti's The Leopard from 1963.
Ugh, cannot wait.
Me too. Thank you, Greg, for this. I had a wonderful time as always.
Me too, Bill. Take care. Thank you for listening to Riviera Rats.
Our podcast is hosted and produced by Bill Antoniou and Gregory Roseborough.
Our music is by Joe Organ.
Our artwork is by Leo Kuvaris.
Follow us on Instagram at Riviera Rats.
Write to us at ratsriviera@gmail.com.
If you want to support our show, tell your friends about us.
Leave us a rating and a review on whatever podcast app you use.